Welcome to a very interesting podcast discussion today. It's my honor and privilege that we have Siraj Chaudhary with us today. Siraj is a well-known corporate honcho in the agriculture ecosystem of India. Everyone, be it a corporate or a farmer or a government bureaucrat or a startup honcho, everyone knows him and respects him. And currently, after spending some time with Cargill, he's working with Agvaya, an advisory firm in the agriculture space. I look forward to discussing a bunch of interesting things around what the government is doing, which sectors of agriculture are looking interesting, and how he sees the space evolving. Welcome. Siraj, I'm very happy we could finally organize this session. We've been talking about it for quite a while.
I know.
So very happy that you could take out the time and we could sit down and have this conversation. Thank you so much for taking
My
out
pleasure.
the time. Like we were just talking about people in a certain generation and, how some of the people like you have seen kind of wild swings and, rapid growth and so on and so forth. I think for a large part of the audience, they would already know enough about you. But for some of the younger audience, it'd be very nice if you can start with a brief introduction about your illustrious past.
Oh, so I've been associated with the food and agri industry for now about 37 years. Started my career with the State Trading Corporation. This is pre-liberalization era when trade was still conducted through the government channels. And after passing out from the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, STC was a good organization to join. I was fortunate that I joined STC at a time when they had leadership that wanted to be more than just a government canalizing agency. And we were allowed to set up projects which were really about dealing with the agriculture processing and soybeans to be specific. So I spent a couple of years there learning it the hard way, going to the mandis, buying soybeans, getting it processed, selling the oil. India was a big exporter of oil meals at that time. Then moved to ITC, which was again an organization. Now 1991, 92, the whole liberalization space, happened. And one of the thrust areas were exports. So most major corporations focused on increasing their exports. I mean, large companies set up export divisions, separate groups within their larger organizations. And ITC too went in for agri-business. They created a division and I became part of that, where again, the whole focus was on agriculture exports. And this time, moving from Madhya Pradesh, which was soybean, I moved to the south, which was for rice bran exports. And while this was happening, I got an opportunity to join Cargill, which was just starting up in India at that time. And we were just a liaison office, and I started from a servants' quarter converted into an office
Wow.
for Cargill at that time. We weren't even a company. And 1995, the government of India opened up edible oil imports for the private sector. And that Cargill being a big mover of edible oils around the world, we got an opportunity to get into that business. And that kind of got me deeper into the edible oil space. As a result of that, I moved to Geneva within Cargill to be on their trading desk, more from a perspective of Cargill trying to train me to understand trading. So that was my exposure for the next 5 years in commodity trading. And then I came back to build Cargill's food business in India, starting with edible oils, then went on to do corn milling. Later on, Cargill went into cocoa and chocolate, bio products coming out of the byproducts of edible oil refining. So, and one thing led to the other. So I've essentially been part of the agriculture, food processing, food supply chain, the whole trade flows around the world. So one has kind of been dealing with all those things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I remember we were speaking about the industry government interactions in one of our earlier conversations. And you mentioned that in the early days, especially in the agriculture department, there was very limited interactions from the government with the industry. And you were one of the early people to go and educate that, there's a need for a stronger engagement. Would love to hear some of those old stories.
Yes, in the early 2000s, I would say that the government had greater control. I mean, India was a different country 20 years ago. We were still grappling with food security, and government's primary role was to ensure that everyone had food, and therefore stocks, what to produce. Government was the leading buyer. I mean, even today, the biggest grain player in the country is the government. And so they really didn't see the need for the private sector, and or at least that wasn't visible. There were companies like Cargill, ITC, who started doing some of the stuff with the farmers on the ground. Cargill had a program called Sati where we were attempting to procure directly from the farmers. ITC had the e-Chopal. So Mahindra, Shriram, and some large corporates which had inherently an engagement with agriculture did make a beginning, but I'm not sure that the response from the government at that time was, it was like, okay, good, welcome to the party, but stay within your limits. So we did have occasions where the government would tell us not to buy because the government needed to buy, and so those kind of things. But gradually, I think, and there were enlightened leadership in the government, both in the people in what I would call the bureaucracy and the political class, which recognized that as India was opening up, there was a greater need to integrate and understand the global scenario, and there, and information wasn't as easily available then as it is now. So that is the time when the private sector companies like Cargill, I mean, I was leading Cargill at that time, got that entry into government. Even my predecessor was involved in some of the policy making where the government needed inputs from the private sector. But gradually, that's how that interaction happened, and the onus was there then on with us to build that trust. I mean, I realized that in 2007, I think it was, that I was invited for this pre-budget consultation that the finance minister holds with the industry, with various segments. And when I sat in that room, which was a gathering of agriculture experts or people involved with the agriculture sector, I realized I was probably the only one from the private sector. I mean, there were people from the universities, the farmer unions, the scientists, the water. I mean, there were illustrious names at that time who were participating. I mean, there were Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Sharad Joshi, Dr. Desai was there. And so all these people were there. But from a private sector, I saw myself as being the only one there. And that was the time I realized that the government does want to interact with us. But and one learning that I got from one of my friends, someone who was in the government and later became friend, was that while you may be the smartest guy around in terms of what agriculture should be and what the government policy should be, do not forget that there is a very large political imperative that the government has to deal with. So I think my biggest learning, which I kept with me and used it time and again, was to never lose sight of what's in it for the government. So everything that I was wanting to do with the government had to first be passing through the filter of what's in it for the government.
Wonderful, wonderful. Actually, on that note, today, if you were to talk about, giving recommendations to the ministry, or the government, saying that these are the 2-3 big steps you should take in agriculture for the benefit of the overall agriculture ecosystem and the country at a large, what would those be?
Currently, I think the government has a lot of information. I mean, there are enough people advising the government, and the government has had deep experiences over the years of, and if you notice over the last 15, 20 years, various policies have been rolled out. So my first recommendation would be to just take a look at everything that has been rolled out in the past and see how they have performed. Because they were all good, well thought through policies, but have they attained the goal? I mean, we've created this agriculture fund, we've had the FPO, we've had efforts on R&D. We've repeatedly had oilseed mission, pulses mission, all kinds of missions. We had tops, tomato, onion, potato thing. So there were various initiatives, and they were all very well thought out. The question I would have, or the recommendation I would have actually, is to say that, okay, just revisit and evaluate those performances. I mean, it's no point launching more schemes. Of course, some of those things, as they were launched probably at that time, are outdated or things may have changed. But I think finding how we've delivered on that and what can be done, because if they were so good, then we shouldn't be having some of the problems that we're facing today. So that's one. The second is that there has been a lot more. We've shifted from being a space where we said about. I remember I was leading FICCI's food processing committee in 2013, I think, and we got a report done called Feeding a Billion, right? And which was like, what does India need to feed a billion population? Today, if you see, most of the conversation is about getting to 100 billion exports by 2030. So that is, in effect, the move that we've made.
Yeah.
And I think the government has done its job, but still there is a lot to be done.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, in many of the conversations now, it's no longer about food security; it's about nutrition security and whatnot.
Absolutely.
So it's
So we
great
made
that
progress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
we've made great progress. Um, because you've been involved in the whole gamut of agri ecosystem, especially with your new role in Agvaya. Which sectors or which subsectors do you think are doing a lot better than the others? I mean, would it be more on the input side? Would it be more on the warehousing side? Is it more the output supply chain? Are there some specific subsegments which are looking more exciting, more promising, more action oriented?
So I would, step back a bit. If we looked at agriculture 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and I've said this very often, that Indian agriculture was really a tripartite agreement between God, government, and the farmer.
Government and farm.
And which was really about the rains. Obviously, we are still
Yeah.
irrigation, monsoon dependent. Government, of course, decided all the policies, and the farmer tilled the fields. Actually, if you go back to some of the old Hindi movies, the trader was the evil guy.
Absolutely.
The
Even
exploiter
today.
was the exploiter of the farmer, and the government was the protector of the farmer, right? So that is the history of or the past of where we are coming from.
Right.
I think that game has changed. So apart from God, who's always relevant, government always relevant, farmer has to be there. The new elements that have come in, I would say, is technology, industry, and and trade. So those are the three elements that have got added to the old ecosystem. What that has done is that some of the low-hanging fruits, I would say, that where technology has enabled some of the low-hanging fruits to be addressed, which is essentially improving the supply chain. You know, with a farming community, which is 50% of now, of course, it's a smaller thing, but 20 years ago, it was like 55, 60%. How do you reach to those farmers? How do you connect with those farmers? Technology has enabled that connectivity. In the risk capital which has come in of late, which is the whole investment funds and which are coming into agtech, have given the power to these technology-led companies to go out and work or connect with the farmers, whether it is to educate them or to sell produce to them or to buy produce from them. So those areas have actually, and everything that came in the way, whether it was setting up warehousing, whether it was financing, whether it was marketing of inputs, or in a limited manner buying of output, and elements of traceability, all those things are crop insurance, soil health. All technology has enabled that interaction with the farmer and the supply chain for the world of agriculture in India to change. So those have been, I would say, most of the solutions have come on the post-harvest side.
Okay. So it's interesting that you speak about, the post-harvest, which is where the maximum action has happened, and I concur with you. There is a lot of activity happening there. If I were to flip the question and talk about, which sub-segments sees the maximum challenges, what would that be?
I would say agri research. I mean, there's effort happening, but the process is so long that the outcomes can happen or may not even happen. I think there is need to get into more, seed research, particularly with this challenge of climate change coming upon us. Drought resistant, flood resistant seed, productivity increase. So all those are the areas I think that are what I would call the fundamentals that we need to set right. And I think we also have this thought somewhere which is about natural farming, organic farming, and which in a way sometimes you get statements which seemingly dissuade or downplay technology. And I think we need to get a balance between the two. And nothing is bad. It is just that different regions are amenable to different approaches and priorities that face the nation. So it is important that we have enough food. It is important that we have enough or the right nutrition. It is important that we build an agri-export presence. So all these things have to find the right balance. Very often, people take extreme views to say that, okay, organic is the best or natural farming is the thing that we need to do. But those are not necessarily universal solutions. I mean, they can be applied in pieces, but that doesn't take away from the larger goals of getting a country to be healthy and nutritionally satiated. Let's put it that way.
Completely agreed. We've got roughly 13 or 15 different agroclimatic zones, and then we have the cultural or the history of certain areas being naturally avoiding fertilizers and chemicals and just doing natural farming for a long period of time. Those are obviously more amenable to what we refer to as organic or natural farming. And if some other place needs a transition, it's going to take a lot more effort and a lot more time. In fact, when you spoke about the need for R&D and more development on the seed side, it just struck me as well that most of the startup action has also happened only on the post-harvest side. You haven't seen a lot of initiatives on the
Yeah,
R&D.
because these are faster returns versus slower returns. I mean, money is
patient
chasing,
capital is just not there.
is just not there. So maybe the government will need to step in, back it. The regulatory framework will have to be more adaptive. And there are enough people working on it. So not to say that work is not happening, but I think the pace of change has to be increased.
Absolutely, absolutely. Picking up on that natural farming and kind of more sustainable farming topic, there's been a lot of talk about trying to shift the farmers from paddy and to do something which is like more value adding for the farmer as well as less water guzzling, so to say. What are your thoughts? Where is it doable? And is there real meaningful action happening on the ground?
Okay, so the first question I sort of normally have for this is that, people like us sitting in nice, comfortable places, looking at statistics very easily sort of, I mean, can naturally see that, paddy is not necessarily the kind or the size of the paddy crop that we have in this country is not what we should be for, apart from the water guzzling, the methane. Emissions, but let's look at it from the farmers. I mean, how can the poor guy with 2 acres of land, 5 acres of land, be expected to solve the country's problem of water availability and methane emission and all that? So the first change has to be to make the alternate to rice or paddy cultivation more attractive for the farmer. Someone will need to put their money where the mouth is, so to say, and that the government has been trying to do, and of course, so there are two things. One is that change the way rice is cultivated, so the DSR and the other varieties of rice which are less water guzzling, less time in the field. But more importantly, how do we get the farmer to find the alternatives more attractive? So someone will have to put the money. I mean, there's a whole push behind millets. There is a growing need for corn because of the ethanol play. All those are substitutes for rice. But why should the farmer adopt it? And who's going to backstop them? Today, the government backstops the farmer for paddy, right, to a large extent.
Correct.
And that in that same extent, the backstop has to be for the farmer.
Makes sense. Makes sense. When the whole discussion around carbon from better farming practices came up, the same question was on everybody's mind. If you want the farmer to change his approach and kind of make some money out of carbon credit, is it really meaningful enough? Does the total money he make from his acre actually improve by just those small carbon credits, or does he actually lose out on his productivity? And it was still early days. I think people are still trying to figure out what changes will make it in the long term kind of sustainable. So completely agreed that if the farmer makes money and you're helping him kind of transition, then the transition will happen. But if you're just saying, oh, the country needs you to reduce water, he's not going to change, and rightly so. Why should he change?
I mean, he's fighting for survival. I mean,
Absolutely.
he's not here to do the good for the society.
Good for the society. If you look at the overall range of agricultural commodities and different products across the region, we have a few beautiful success stories. Darjeeling tea is one of that, and Kashmiri saffron is another. Do you see any other segments which you believe can really become big, create like a global impact?
See, we're doing various things when we look at India's sort of presence in the world market. So we've got a space with the shrimp. We've got, of course, you mentioned Darjeeling tea or Kashmiri saffron. You could talk about, slope-grown coffee. You could talk, I mean, basmati rice, of course, has built a reputation for itself. But yes, so I mean, we've got grapes, we may have exotic mangoes, and so some of those things will be there, and they're good. I mean, because they are obviously creating the incentive for people to cultivate those categories or those produce, and the government setting up the infrastructure to particularly build the trust around those, whether it is testing, handling, storage, transportation, and that will help some of this grow. But will they take us to the 100 billion agri-exports that we are aspiring for? I'm not as optimistic. I mean, that will require something bigger.
What could that bigger be?
So it will be a combination of two things. So there will be what we've just talked about. It will need to be a combination of value and volumes.
Sure.
So whether it's Darjeeling tea or Kashmiri saffron, as you mentioned, they are the value products, right? So there will be small volumes, large value, and we need to build them up. But the larger numbers will come from growing more crops which are in volumes. The countries which have large exports, their numbers are not made up of these. They're like large numbers of soybean, large number of corn or edible oils for the palm countries. So we will, and what will that require? That will require a significant increase in productivity, which, because obviously the land is not going to grow. There is only so much switching of crops that can happen. So essentially the surpluses will have to be generated from the large crops for large shift in agriculture direction. I mean, you look at countries like Argentina, Brazil, which have become over the last 30, 40 years such big exporters of some of the crops. It is through their shift to the larger crops. I mean, you've seen coffee grow in Vietnam, Indonesia. You've seen different crops grow in some of the countries which have taken leadership positions in spaces where they hardly found mention 20 years ago or whatever.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that brings me to the end of my questions. Any concluding thoughts?
No, I think, I believe that Indian agriculture is moving in the right direction. What needs to change is the pace. And it is what holds back the pace is this back to the learning I had 20 years ago, that politics and agriculture are very closely knit. And I don't think in a democracy you can separate them. So we will need to see how governments can, smoothly balance that equation. Because in the end, I think for a population that is growing, facing challenges of climate change, needing more nutrition, and we are actually very nutrition deficient, we will need to do big things to overcome some of those challenges that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.